Good evening. Tonight is Tuesday, October 16, 2018, and this is the opening of the Hanson Board of Selectmen meeting. This meeting is being taped by Whitman Hanson Cable Access. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Good evening, Hanson. Here are this week's announcements. The Hanson Boy Scout Troop 68 will hold its annual pumpkin sale at the Town Hall Green on Friday, October 19th from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, October 20th and 21st from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. The troop will be holding a flag retirement ceremony on Monday, November 5th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. on the Town Hall Green. The Hanson Youth Cheerleading is sponsoring a meat raffle on Saturday, October 20th at 1 p.m. at the Hanson American Legion at 92 Robinson Street. Everyone is welcome to attend. The Hanson Police Department will be holding a blood drive in conjunction with the Kraft Family Blood Donor Center on Sunday, October 21st from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. For appointments, to make an appointment, visit tinyurl.com/Hanson October 2018 or call 617-632-3206. The Veterans Office will be closed from October 22nd to October 25th for training. Please plan your business accordingly. Volunteers are needed for the Camp Kewanee Halloween Extravaganza, which will be held on Sunday, October 28th from noon to 4 p.m. If you'd like to volunteer, please download an application online at officialcampkewanee.com or come to the camp during normal business hours. If you'd like to decorate a cabin, cabin decorations are also online at officialcampkewanee.com. Absentee ballots are now available at the Hanson Town Clerk's office for the state election and special town election being held on Tuesday, November 6th. Any registered voter who is unable to vote in person on election day due to absent from town, physical disability, or religious belief may obtain an absentee ballot. Voters may absentee vote in person at the town clerk's office or by mail. Applications for absentee ballots will be accepted at the town clerk's office until noon, Monday, November 5th. For more information, call the town clerk's office at 781-293-2772. Early voting will begin on October 22nd and continue through November 2nd. 2018 for state elections only on November 6th. Early voting can be done at person at the Hanson Town Hall, 542 Liberty Street during normal business hours, which are Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Tuesday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and on Friday, 8 a.m. to noon. Volunteers are needed on the following committees: 200th Anniversary, Capital Improvement, Cultural Council, Economic Development, Elder Affairs, Finance, Memorial Day Patriot Observance, Memorial Field Trustees, Recreation, Zoning Board Alternate, and applications for appointment and information on the committees are available on the town website at hanson-ma.gov. Vacancies on the following elected boards: Board of Health and 2 members on the Hanson Housing Authority. Applications for appointment and information on the committees are available at the town's website. Upcoming meetings: the Nathaniel Thomas Mill will be meeting on Wednesday, October 17th at 7 p.m. 200th Anniversary on Thursday, October 25th at 7 p.m. The Hanson Selectmen will be meeting on October 30th, November 13th, and November 27th at 7 p.m.
Thanks, Matt. So first on the new business, we have introduction of IT Director Ryan McGonigal. And this position is being shared with our neighboring community, East Bridgewater. So tonight we have the East Bridgewater Board of Selectmen here. Also, we have the police chief here, and also the fire chief, and also George, the town administrator, to help Ryan get started on the right feet. So Ryan, if you want to come up and sing a song for us, that'd be great.
Oh, my word.
Just give us a brief little
Sure. Like I said, my name is Ryan McGonigal. Currently, I reside in the town of Berkeley, Massachusetts. I've been in IT for a little over 10 years. I started with a private company in Cambridge, then moved to the Fall River School District about 9 years ago. After about 3 years, I left that district and moved to the Dayton Rehoboth District, which I've been there for about 6+ years. The last 2+ as the technology and network manager for the district. My spare time, I enjoy spending time with my wife, sports. It's really it about myself. I'm really excited to be coming on board. I've been speaking both to George and Mike. I'm really excited about the opportunity it's going to be coming to me, and the projects that we could do together. All in all, I'm just really excited and been happy to support both towns.
Great, thank you. Mike, do you and George want to give us just a quick, brief idea of the process you guys went through?
Yeah, George and I spoke, how long ago did we start this, George? It's been months. It's been months. And as the board, both boards are aware, we went through 2 different iterations in which we had spoken to someone and brought them before our boards, or came close to bringing them before our boards. And I think fortunately we have landed an extremely talented, experienced individual that's going to work out wonderfully for both towns. George and I are very excited about the prospect of you beginning in November. It is a somewhat unique approach between the 2 towns in sharing such a position. I think it's something you'll see more and more of in the future among other towns, given the costs involved, sometimes the lack of the people out there that can do these sorts of jobs. And George and I have been talking about any future potential to replicate this sort of an arrangement in other areas that we can share. It is something we're very excited about. George and I will be sitting with Ryan in the next week or so. We'll be discussing the particulars in terms of what times, what hours, what days he will be in which town. Though, as I'm sure George has explained to his board and I have explained to this board, those are not set in stone, that if something really dramatic happens in East Bridgewater and happens to be Ryan's time to be here in Hanson, he'll go over to East Bridgewater and deal with that emergency, and vice versa. So it will be fairly well structured, but not to the point where it strangles and it's at the detriment to either of the communities. And George and I will be meeting on a regular basis with Ryan to get updates as to what he has addressed, what he has accomplished, just so that we can report back to our 2 respective boards that things are working the way these boards expect them to. So I don't know if George wants to add in a few things.
Well, Mike put in pretty much most of what we've done. The only thing I'll echo on is that the state currently is big on regionalization. And I think one of the underlying themes of this has been that if we can't pull off a regionalization between Hanson and East Bridgewater with all the similarities that we have between us. In this particular case, we've got a number of softwares that we're using. We have relationships that are amongst our department heads, all of which have been fairly well developed. It's really quite a good situation. And if we couldn't do it in this case, it's going to be tough to do it any other place than what we've got here. From a standpoint of Ryan, I think it was like cutting teeth to finally get here, but I think we got the guy that we need for the job. And the only other thing I'll put into it is that we invited both the 2 chiefs, and I think your 2 chiefs are here as well. And the only, this is not to diminish, there was 8 people on each side, or 8 or 9 people on each side, depending on, I didn't do a count when I came over, but we had about 8 with us. But when it came down to fish and cut bait, the chiefs started doing their yeoman's work, and they were, getting us prospects and what have you. So I felt like they kind of went above and beyond. And then, of course, you got your 2 respective town councils, Leo Pellegrin, whom again, similarity, used to work for the town of East Bridgewater, John Clifford, they both have a relationship, and they did up all the contractual for it. So, it's been very good.
Does anyone have any questions?
No, I thank you guys for working collaboratively. It's exciting to be able to partner with you. You are next door neighbors, and we do have a lot of similarities, so we'll see how this goes, and maybe it's the first of many collaborations.
Good. Well, Ryan, good luck, and thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to meeting and working with all of you.
Okay, next up, do we have a representative here from Columbia Gas? We do.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you wanna let
Michael
East Bridgewater go
and
before we
Nick.
get into it?
What's that?
Do you want to let East Bridgewater go before we
Yeah,
get
yeah.
into the...
You guys want to come up and give us a...
Where do you want to, where do you typically?
You can go right to the podium. Just give it 30 seconds, just to let these guys clear out. Just give us a brief description of where you are. Thank you.
Sure.
Good, thanks. How's everything?
Oh, good, thanks. Sure, I gotta grab one in a second here.
Nice.
Good.
Well, good evening, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the members of the board. I'm Michael Kane, Director of Government Affairs with Columbia Gas of Massachusetts, out of the corporate office in Westboro, Massachusetts. I'm joined with Nick Wilson here, Field Engineer for Columbia Gas out of our Brockton Division. And obviously, we're coming in front of you. Would like to see if there's any questions you'd like to answer or explain how you want us to start or however you want us to lead off.
I guess we're more interested in you guys assuring us of that current gas project that you're working on Whitman and Winter Street. That's kind of been, what the questions have been asked of this board by different residents,
I mean, we just want to make sure that you're going to be putting protocols in place in our project that are going to prevent any type of catastrophic situation like there was in Lawrence and Andover. And I know that the Department of Public Works has put a moratorium on projects until December 1st, I think.
Correct.
For you guys. I assume that applies to the Hanson project.
Correct.
Okay, and if you can just kind of tell us what, what
Sure.
protocols you're gonna put
If I could kind of just explain the difference between the Merrimack Valley incident and here. The one thing I can't go into detail is the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, is still under investigation. There's a preliminary report that is out right now that they've released. That is, everything that can be discussed on that report. However, there's still more investigation that goes into it. So where they've asked us is not to talk about any more of the investigation. So what I can give you, though, is the difference between, and I'll have Nick run in a little bit more on the engineering side. We have three divisions. We have our Brockton division, which includes Hanson. We also have our Springfield division in Springfield, Massachusetts. So Brockton division, probably about 45 communities in that Brockton division, 16 communities out in the western part of the state in Springfield, and then 4 or 5 communities in the Merrimack Valley Lawrence division. So nothing is intertwined with any type of gas lines running in between those areas. All service differently, serve differently from the distributor, the pipeline distributor that would provide gas to us. So 3 different type of systems, and no relation to the Merrimack Valley incident in our piping here in Hanson. If
There is the same contractor being used, right? In Hanson that was being used in Lawrence and Andover?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have many different types of contractors that come in. And of our contractors, all of them they run operator qualifications that has to run through our Northeast Gas Association. All of them have Massachusetts hoisting licenses, all of the licenses that are required to be a gas operator in the field. Just like the employees that we have working for Columbia Gas, our contractors have to have the same operator qualifications.
Okay, so help us make people in Hanson feel safe that you guys are going to be doing work here.
And where are we? I mean, we're in a moratorium until December anyway, but we're in the project.
So if we're gonna talk about the station that we're building right now,
It's very similar to what we have right now. The biggest difference being the factors of safety that are in place. Right now we have a underground regulator pit. We're taking that out, we're bringing all that above ground. There's gonna be 3 regulator runs, where this is a 2-run station right now. We are installing like the Cadillac of regulators, a Ferrari. I mean, these regulators have numerous controls, numerous safety features on them. It's going to be an upgrade to the station that's in the ground right now.
And not similar to what you were doing, what was being done there?
No.
Okay.
No. When we do, when the moratorium's up and we do the gassing of the new station, we're going to probably keep the existing one there, make sure everything's good for a little while until we make the final
So
transition.
you run the parallel kind of thing? or-
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Just for a little while, make sure everything's good, so we have a backup. Want the
So,
station that we know.
Let's say the
operates.
moratorium's lifted December 1st. I'm not sure that's a totally solid date, but that's the date that I heard. So if the moratorium is lifted December 1st, what type of time frame are we looking at before you're going to go live with the completely new system?
We still have some more work to do. Most of the piping in the street is done. We will have to do some excavations, additional excavations to liven those new gas lines up. But for the most part, the rest of the work is going to be in the compound or in the fenced-in area right now. The work that we have to finish is primarily in that station.
Right on site.
Correct.
Are you guys gonna be building anything over that? You are?
We had a little bit of piping left to do, and then we were going to bring the building people in, and then
Okay.
everything.
So that's
shut
done
down
afterwards, you
free.
build the building over it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Landscape.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, you've got all kinds of
landscape.
mitigation type of, things. that-
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
no,
we
that
would
works
love to, I recognize that you can't talk about things that are still under investigation and
Thank
haven't
you.
been released. And we do appreciate you guys coming out. I'm sure you've got a million other things you're dealing with at this time, and we're not the only community that's concerned. So hopefully you'll just keep the lines of communication open with
Yes.
us, and when the moratorium's lifted, then we'll get a more firm game plan from you on timelines and all
Of
that.
course, yeah.
Absolutely. And obviously after the NTSB report, the final report, we'd be more than happy to come in and speak to you.
Okay.
We
Anybody
really
else have any
appreciate you
questions?
taking.
That's-
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Okay, next we have Todd. Todd's our town accountant. Irreplaceable.
Absolutely.
Hey, Todd.
Good evening. Good to see you all. This evening, my plan was to provide the board with a first quarter financial update. And as the year progresses, we've scheduled another time together, I believe in January, which will be a preview to the FY 2020 budget, as well as looking at the second quarter. And then I think I'm back again maybe in April to review third quarter and sort of planning for town meeting and any potential department shortfalls or transfers that we might need to execute either at town meeting or after town meeting. So this evening, you should have a 5-page set of exhibits from me. The first 4 are what I'm going to speak to first, which is all of our operating budgets. So page 1 reflects the general fund, most of the departmental service budgets, followed by the water fund, which is a self-supporting special revenue fund. And page 3 and 4 are our 2 enterprise funds for the recreation program and the solid waste transfer station program. And the last exhibit was just sort of a special topic I thought that might be of interest to the board, sort of outside the normal quarterly update. So the format of the first 4 pages is similar. I'm showing the board the budget, how we've done through the first 3 months, what that represents as a percentage of the budget, and also where we were at a year ago at the same point in time, percentage-wise. And this is a report I prepare every month, these 4 pages, and September through June. I typically don't do it over the summer. And this is sort of a prelude, this particular report, to setting of the tax rate, which the board will be considering next month. We're very close to finalizing. Now that the fall town meeting has been completed, we're in a position that the assessors are just going through getting property values finalized and any new construction, new growth certified by the Department of Revenue, and then we'll be in a position to have the board hold a hearing in, I believe, mid-November. So the property tax estimate is very close to actual, but when we set the rate next month, these numbers may move around just a little bit. So I'll just highlight for the board a few things. Again, we're early in the year. Things are going well for the most part. I don't have a lot of concerns to share with you tonight, but I do have a few. So in terms of the general fund, I'll just point out to the board certain revenues, which are at the top part of the exhibit, are seasonal. So the best example is the third line, excise taxes. So as you all know, you get your primary motor vehicle excise tax bill in February. So this revenue is not sort of even throughout the 12 months of our fiscal year. It's more heavily weighted in the spring. Property taxes, as you know, are billed quarterly, so we've seen the results of the first quarter and perhaps a few collections of delinquent taxes and some prepayments of the second quarter. And as you see, we're pretty much right on target at nearly 26% of budget. The payment in lieu of tax is rendered by the assessors, established a little later in the year, and that typically comes in the second half. When we get into the other funds, I'll point out some seasonal things about their revenues as well. On the expenditure side, again, I'm just giving it to the board at sort of high level. Each functional area, general government, public safety, education, public works, and so on. At this point, most everything is, as you see, it's sort of tracking pretty much where we were tracking a year ago at this time. Again, we're not into the winter, so that's when we see the public works section start to change, depending on the severity of the winter. Education, since we're all regional, it's billed quarterly for the most part, so that will follow fairly regularly. The other departments are largely as they need to expend money. Certainly salaries are throughout the year, but this is mostly what I would refer to as a cash basis report. So not all of the September invoices necessarily are reflected in this report, but everything we know about it is included. Debt service is scheduled out and happens at different times of the year. This is to cover, in our case, primarily the police station, the septic loan programs for homeowners, and we've got a number of smaller issues around the regional schools, the new fire engine that was approved by town meeting, and then when we get into water, we'll talk a little bit about water debt as well. They're a little more capital intensive, if you will.
Todd, can you help us understand what we're seeing in that employee benefits and insurance?
Sure. Thank you. So that's another good example. So the next to the last line in the expenditure section, employee benefits and insurance, you'll see we're at over 60% expended through the first quarter. And that is primarily due to the fact that this includes our pension assessment for Plymouth County.
All right.
And that is payable July 1st for the entire year. Now, we can choose to make two payments and spread the cost, but there's an 8% interest tagged on.
Yeah.
And it would cost us, if I recall, about $26,000 more just this year. So we've been in a position where we've had the cash and we've opted to make the single payment in July. So that particular line is at 100%. The other items, and of course the big item in here otherwise is group health insurance. And that's something perhaps we'll talk about in more detail at a future board meeting. We do also have a post-employment actuarial report that you may have seen that has been updated, and maybe perhaps we could talk about that when the audit So that's sort of, we take our known recurring revenues less our operating expenses, and we had certain sources of funds to help fund certain items. For example, we had transfers in, you see, for $425,000. So that is money coming in from the septic loan fund to cover the septic loan debt service. It's about $125,000. And $300,000 coming in from the ambulance receipts reserved fund to offset a portion of the fire department's operating budget. Transfers out primarily have to do with subsidizing the solid waste program, which I'll talk about in a little bit. We do have it's not a fully self-supporting program. We do have an annual subsidy from the taxpayers. And then at the bottom, there are certain other sources of funds that town meeting used to fund certain appropriations. Nearly $600,000 of free cash was used for some of the capital. And so it's essentially we get to a balanced budget, which is part of what we have to demonstrate to the Department of Revenue as part of the tax rate setting process. I will also point out to the board that this report does not reflect the October 1st, the next day, special town meeting. So the next report I provide for you, the budget figures will change. The town did spend just over $250,000 of free cash, if you recall, October 1st. And we did supplement some operating budgets for about $70,000. So that will change the property tax line a bit. So that next month, in terms of your tax rate hearing, you'll see numbers that reflect both the annual town meeting and the fall special at the time of setting the rate. In terms of general government concerns at this point, I know the police chief is, in general, we're a bit challenged with our aging facilities and maintenance of those. To date, we're only 3 months into the year, but I know the chief has had some issues with his HVAC system at the station, so he was actually speaking with the finance committee earlier tonight about those concerns. Other than that, at this point, everything's tracking fairly well. I don't really have any concerns in terms of our general fund. If you take any questions before we go to the second page? Okay. The second page is the water fund. And again, this fund is supported through rates and fees from the ratepayers. There's no tax subsidy. They are able to maintain their own surplus or their own free cash, if you will, depending on how the operation results are at the end of the year. They may add to their equity, and then that's available for only with town meeting approval to be appropriated for a particular purpose. So the Water Commission typically uses their surplus for capital items, truck replacement. October 1st, as you know, they did use a large amount, $500,000, to expand the exploration that they're doing for a new water supply. So they have, staff salaries, expenses, some capital, as I said, what we refer to as indirect costs, which are really covering, in their case, police details, fuel that's used from the town fuel system, employee benefits, workers' compensation, property and liability insurance. So their share of the pension assessment from Plymouth County. So all of those things they do pay for through their rates.
So I assume that's why they're at running at 35. So we're seeing that reflected, the same thing we saw reflected in
That's
the
correct.
prior.
They paid their share of it, which is about 5% of the overall pension assessment.
And do we know what the deal is with the license and permit fee line? It's at 41%. Looks like it's a little.
Yeah, again, thank you. That line primarily reflects connection fees. So when there are new construction or connections, so that's somewhat seasonal. We don't see so much over the winter. Summer and early fall and spring. And that's something, we sort of keep an eye on. more so with property taxes for new construction, but that's where you're seeing connection fees for new
And
water.
do you provide this to the water commissioners in the water department, just so they've got an idea of, you know?
I do work with the superintendent. They have an interim superintendent right now, and actually to further, I actually have a multi-year plan that I do with them, because certainly, as I said, they're more capital intensive. They could be asking for things that make perfect sense, but could, create rate shock. So we've developed a multi-year plan on how they should access their surplus, what debt's coming on, what debt's rolling off and maturing, so that we can sort of stabilize or, attempt to stabilize rates for the ratepayers.
That's great.
But I don't typically do that with the commission. It's typically been while I've been here with the superintendent.
Okay, thank you.
So no concerns at this point with water. And I just would also point out, the user charges are very low. But as you all know, they bill twice a year currently, November and May. So we're 4 or 5 months into the fiscal year, and they haven't generated the revenue that's supporting this year's operation. So with the $1.3 million meter program that was approved October 1st by town meeting, we've advocated to them that they should consider changing the billing cycles and at least do quarterly billing and line it up with, in a manner that this is run more like a business, so that they're generating the revenue to pay their salaries and their operating costs. So that's on the horizon.
Just like we did with the property tax 3 years ago.
That's right, exactly, same thing, yep. Okay, then the third exhibit is the Recreation Enterprise Fund. This is about a $370,000 a year program, which includes just over $50,000 of debt service related to the new septic system, the $300,000 septic system that upgrades that were put in. So this year is the first payment. We've got a 5-year payment scheduled to pay this off. This is the first time it's impacted. You're seeing it in their operating, but reflected in their operating budget. And if you note down below, this actually was funded by a use of their retained earnings. So it was recognized during the budget process that this was a big add, going from 320 to 370, that they didn't have the revenue anticipated to offset that. So it was decided to utilize their retained earnings or their equity to fund the first year's debt service payment. And their equity's been recertified along at the same time our free cash was, so there's adequate funds to cover the next year's payment with a little bit left after that. I will point out to the board that their revenue, you'll notice, is lagging a bit percentage-wise as compared to a year ago. They have had my understanding is they've had some cancellation of some weekend events. The projected revenue for the spring does look a little off compared to what we're used to. So I've been working with the rec director and Mike McHugh just to, and I actually have met with the chair of their board to sort of make sure we all monitor this. And essentially, if the revenues for either solid waste or recreation don't come into the target, each operation needs to make sure their expenses are correspondingly reduced so that, they at the end of the year can cover whatever costs they incur.
Excuse me, Mike, could we plan on talking about this at a future meeting?
Talking about what?
The Camp Kawani situation, financial situation?
No, that hadn't been in.
No, I said, could we?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, we
Yeah,
can.
okay.
I misheard you.
Yeah,
Actually, probably within the not-too-distant future is going to be a conversation or operations up there anyways before the board, so we can combine them all.
okay.
And I know they are looking to grow programs and, there'll be new program revenue, but certainly some of those programs may have new expenses,
Yep.
related expenses. Page 4 of your exhibit, this is a bit more of a concern, perhaps longer term. The solid waste transfer station operation, as some of us have discussed before. It's about a $330,000 a year operation with an $87,000 tax subsidy. That's the transfer in you see, that's the tax subsidy from the general fund. This year's budget was balanced through town meeting by utilizing almost $58,000 of their retained earnings. At that rate, it would seem that the program as it's currently configured could sustain itself for perhaps 2 more fiscal years, at which point they would have likely no equity, and we would be looking at either a larger tax subsidy or some modification to the program. So to your point about discussing recreation, I think
Yes.
this is the more
Yep.
concern in my
I was
view.
just gonna say, Mike, can we also?
Well, we do. We have plans for the Board of Health to come in and have this discussion on the 13th of November.
Okay, great.
Thank you. So it's, the program's, running well this year in terms of budget thus far. It's just, as we look out a bit, it's not sustainable under the current financial model. So that sort of covers the operating budget update for the first quarter. Again, we're not too far into the year. It'll get more interesting as the year and the winter come along. And I'll have updates for you at least quarterly and certainly more often if you like. Lastly, I just thought as sort of a topic of financial interest, there's an exhibit entitled Debt Service as of June 30th. Periodically, I'm asked the question, what's the town's debt capacity? And that sounds like a very straightforward and simple question. And
Jim used to ask you that.
yeah, Jim, that's correct. The textbook response to that would be it's a fairly large number. Our ability under state law to issue debt is quite a high number. I would tell you that our ability to make those debt service payments would result in issuance of a much lower amount of debt. So what I thought might just start off, stimulate a little interest and perhaps future conversation. This exhibit really outlines our existing debt, which is, including our share of the regional school debt, is just under $13 million as of June 30th. What I've done is sort of break it into components so that you see how each subgroup is funded. And this really gets to, I think, the real question when people ask me, how much debt can we issue? It's really, what can we afford without impacting our other operations? So at the top, I've shown you the first grouping is what we refer to as debt-excluded projects. So that's our police station. And we have 2 items with the regional school district, the payment of the regional high school, which matures in FY 2027, has a remaining principal of $5.4 million. And then they did some technology upgrades a couple of years ago. Whitman at the time chose to pay cash. We didn't have that much cash at the time. We opted to finance it over 5 years. So this matures in 2 more fiscal years in 2021. So again, the exhibit's showing you the outstanding principal, the remaining interest to be paid over the remaining life of the loans. And so those were voter-approved exclusions where the voters said, yes, we approve those projects, we're willing to pay extra property taxes for those. So we have a dedicated revenue stream, if you will, to make those debt payments. However, when the debt matures, the revenue stream goes away. It's no longer added to the tax bills. It's not like something within the tax levy that then sort of frees up so we can take on new debt. So that represents just under 5.8 of the nearly 13 million of debt. The next group that I show you is what we are paying for within the levy limit, within our recurring operating means. Stormwater management, the cleanup of the Plymouth County Hospital property, the design for McQuon Street, which will then phase into a construction phase that I think is all financed through a federal grant, I believe. Purchase of a new fire engine and HVAC improvements at the middle school. So it's about $2.5 million. And as you see, it has a fairly short maturity by 2025. The way we have the debt structured, this will all be paid off. So as things roll off, there is the ability to take on new debt, if you will, but it's more available after 2025. We'll have small amounts available between now and then. The next grouping is the septic loans. We still have about $1.9 million outstanding in loans for homeowner septic repairs. This is all paid through homeowner loans, and at town meeting we approve the debt payment and we use the source of funds as the septic loan fund. So there's no concerns. I mean, for all the years we've been running this program, I think we have one property we have a lien on that has a fairly large, about a $45,000 septic loan. But otherwise, we have, the way the program's working, there's plenty of money to make all of the debt payments, so there's no burden to the taxpayers.
And ultimately, we'll get our money back even on the 45,000.
Correct. Yes, that's right. We have one piece of debt related to recreation that I mentioned earlier when we talked about their budget. That was the septic system upgrade, which I mentioned cost about $300,000, $250,000 of which was financed, and that will be paid off the way it's currently structured in FY 2023. The water operation has just about $2.6 million, and you can see it's for various purposes, main improvements, the tank rehab that was done recently, and some main replacement. October 1st, the town meeting approved another $1.3 million, which we'll add to this grouping for the new meter program. And certainly as the exploration goes further, there may be well development. There's talk of another tank. And so it's very capital intensive, but again, we're working with them to structure that all through water rates. So the plan is to not have any impact to property taxes. So when you look at our debt in this way, it's really just that second grouping that gives us any flexibility to issue general obligation debt without going to the voters. Now, certainly there are other sources of funds, for example, community preservation, that we could look at for certain related projects that they could contribute or make the debt payments, if you will. So as those projects come up, we'll work with the board to see, how we can best fit it in with our debt service plan. But I thought this might be a good sort of high-level look.
No, it was, is.
I like page 5.
That page 5 is super helpful,
Great.
because we get asked this a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I thought when I do quarterly updates for the board, I can always do the first 4 pages, but we can always pick a topic, if you like debt. I just sort of chose this on my own, that we could have a conversation about going forward.
Is it of your opinion that the town of Hanson is fiscally sound?
Yes,
Okay, excellent.
yes. Yeah, I mean, we certainly have challenges ahead. Yeah, funding education properly,
Well, that's what I was.
employee benefits,
So-
post-employment obligations. There's plenty of challenges, but
Our brethren in Whitman, as you
Yes.
know, are grappling mightily with how they're going to fund
I've
the
heard.
schools.
Yes.
Do you anticipate that we will be dealing with that, in as much as we'll be dealing with it to the extent they can't, and trying to figure out, where we land while we're negotiating that? Do you feel comfortable that we, by and large, will have what we need?
I think we're in a much better position. I think we've been very thoughtful about our financial planning. Not to speak
No, I
against-
know what you mean.
But certainly, we can't absorb double-digit increases
Mhm.
without asking for additional resources. But certainly, anything within a reasonable realm, we are positioned to be able to continue to support.
Good. Does anybody else have any questions?
No. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay.
Todd, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, as usual.
Have a good evening.
Okay, next up, Eric. Come on up, Eric. Eric's gonna give us a brief update, right?
I was here in June. I'm going to give you guys a couple little take-homes. Thank you. Know where to watch us here?
Cable swag?
Gifts.
We're getting cable swag?
No, this is
As
under
long as it's
$50.
under $50.
Yeah.
Good
I don't
point,
get any
Kenny.
notice.
And I got a few more back on the table there, if anybody from the audience. I'll see
There you go, Melissa.
Okay.
Have a right night, Tracy.
Melissa, take two.
So yeah, like I said, as I was walking across, I was here presenting to you in June, so there's not a ton. But there was a couple of things that I thought were pressing that I wanted to bring to your attention that are in front of us right now. One of the things which I hadn't necessarily planned on, you may have seen, we've actually been in the news a couple times this past week. One was for something really good that didn't happen that we did, but we captured it on video, and that was the ref falling down last Friday's game, and the wonderful response from the students, the student athletes on that. And the other was the vandalism that occurred at our building, which I'm happy to report. We have identified the suspect for that, who has admitted guilt and is going to make right on that. So the Whitman police were helpful in helping us find that, as was that video that we put up. And so anybody who did help and share that, we really do appreciate that, because it was absolutely instrumental in helping to bring that to resolution. So we'll look forward to more updates to the facility, like the couple brief ones that I'll mention here, because we'll be getting a new sign as well, apparently. We also had, there's been some fiber projects. I don't know if I updated you about that last time, I can't recall, but the recent town meeting that you had actually came back to our studio over fiber, so you probably noticed it looked better. You may have noticed these meetings look better. Those are both coming to us over fiber now, so that has made some increases in quality and improvements. We've worked to optimize our aspect ratios. The problem is we're stuck working in a 4:3 standard definition platform, and all the equipment that you can buy these days is high definition 16:9. So we're trying to optimize that as best we can. Unfortunately, it probably means in some way somebody's going to have to hit a Zoom button on their remote for our content. And we apologize that it's that way, and if there's ever an opportunity we can change that, we look to do so. We also launched a show with Mike. Carol, who's in the back of the room here, produces Townworks with Mike, so he's coming in and giving us some updates and sitting down with department heads and things like that. We're very excited about that. And then we've got a whole bunch of other political and election-related information that's on the channel right now from the candidates who are running for office or who just did run in the primaries. As I mentioned, there's been a bunch of facility updates. We've got all new windows and additional security measures on those windows. I think you saw the security cameras. We've got those. We also have now fully brought our edit lab online. I know I've kind of talked about that in past updates, but with the new windows and the security in front of those windows, we've been able to bring that system online, so we look forward to the doors that opens. We put in a generator. Unfortunately, our power has been spotty. We just lost power this past weekend. The generator's not hooked up. Part of that is the natural gas problem that we're obviously still working through in terms of the labor dispute. But once that's done, we should have more consistent power. We should have less resets as a result of that and things like that. We've done some general painting and landscaping as well, so a bunch of facility work over the summer because those are the months that it's easier to do that work. Looking ahead, we are doing some work on the furniture in the studio, in the set, and also throughout the facility, just for folks to use. And then we're also working on other equipment that is sort of around the two towns, in rooms like these, and then other stuff that's in our truck or in our studio, just kind of upgrading that. So the reason I really wanted to come in was to update you on some of the legislative things that are happening. I had told you in the past about the bill to try and get a high definition for our channels and electronic programming guide information. It unfortunately did fail last, now that the past two times it's gone through the legislature. So it doesn't seem that that's going to happen immediately. And there's some other state level stuff, but the real important reason that I'm here and what's clipped inside of that document there, on top is a template letter, which I hope, after hearing what I tell you about some of the changes that may be coming from the Federal Communications Commission, perhaps that's a template letter that I could send you in digital form, which you might consider sending off to
our local senator, well, not our local senator, our state senators, to sign on. Ed Markey has got a bill, and so we're looking to get as much support as we can get. We want them to know that we don't want these changes to happen. And what those changes are is there's two important things. One is going to be as we move into 5G wireless and we start to have cell towers coming to telephone poles instead of being off in a field somewhere. That's going to change the way that these entities come in and franchise, just like cable franchises when they come in to do services and to use those same poles. The concern is that there may be, as they bypass the franchising process for this 5G, it will pave the way for a change in the franchising process for the cable companies. So that's a threat to our primary and pretty much only source of funding. Focusing, getting that funding in that way allows us to focus on our mission and not on fundraising and things like that. That might be something we'd have to look at if that were to go through. And the other one that is potentially more concerning is there's actually going to be potentially the ability for the cable companies to do a chargeback for what they consider to be in-kind services. It's a little bit ambiguous. We don't know exactly what that's going to be, but it could be the value of the channels. It could be the value of the equipment that is sort of behind the wall. We're responsible for equipment up to a certain point, and then after that, it kind of goes into the cloud, so to speak, for us. We don't know what that cost is. Our concern would be, what if those costs just dwindle down off of the number that comes in to fund what we do, even perhaps to a point where it's a deficit. And instead of getting funding, we now owe because of the services that are out there. So there's a lot of concerns, and a lot of those concerns are about the unknown, and we're continuing to find out more information. I've mentioned before during my presentations that we have partnered with Mass Access, where I'm also a board member, which is a state-level trade and advocacy group. So we're chasing these things there, and we've partnered federally, nationally, with the Alliance for Community Media, which is a national organization. Both of those organizations are working hard. They're monitoring what's happening. They're reading more into the details as they come out, and they're filing, most importantly, comments during this 30-day comment period we're in now, which will allow us to file then responsitory comments after, say, if the cable companies make a comment, we want to be able to rebut that comment. And then ultimately, we may have to do an appeal. It could all be a very expensive process with attorneys and trips to DC and things like that, because it's a federal issue. So, which is why now we want to, as much as we can, try and get your support to understand or to claim how important what we do is. We know that people don't live and die by what's on our channels, but they feel that if we went away, people would miss it. And so we just hope that we can count on your support in saying that this is a valuable item to have in the community and a valuable service, and that we can send that wherever that may be. I know that sort of my template letter, when it ends, it's kind of unclear on what the call to action is, and that's because it's changing. At the time I wrote that letter, we were asking the Mass Municipal Association to sign on in opposing this. Well, they have. So that sort of has changed the what we have the call to action now. Today, the call to action is sign on to Senator Markey's letter from other senators. So if anybody knows another senator or knows somebody in another state even that will sign on to that, that's going to be important. But again, in a week or two, we could have a new call to action and be looking for help in a new way. So I just wanted to bring this matter to your attention. I'm going to be bringing it to the Whitman Board of Selectmen's attention later this month. It's happening quickly, but we're trying to stay on top of it. Are there any questions related to that or any of the
Nice
other?
work, Eric. Every time you come in, you're all over it.
He
So
gets it out of the ballpark.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So keep up the good work. Any questions, you guys?
No, I'm gonna have to read.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, page 2 of that is the.
He gave you his card too, so
release,
you can always
yep.
call him too.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, for you folks or for anybody watching, we'll actually have our truck down at the Truck or Treat event on the 27th.
Oh, good.
I welcome folks to come by, see the truck, but also come by and ask questions. Happy to answer them there. Our website is on those cards, it's on those clips, and it's whca.tv. You can follow our social media. We've got a new newsletter that's coming out, which you can subscribe to through our website or through social media as well. So we welcome people to get engaged. It's a great way to stay on top of what's happening in the two communities.
Eric, thank you very much.
You're welcome as always.
So I'm gonna jump around a little bit here. Next, I have the Hanson PTO request for a reduction of the fee for a Polar Plunge fundraiser, January 27, 2019. Melissa, I think you've waited patient enough. So do you want to tell us what you guys are doing? What you want to do?
Thank you, George. So, as an active member of the PTO, I've been trying to think of ways to sort of bring the community together, and bring them together in a way that also supports the students and children here in our community. So my husband has been talking about doing a polar plunge for years, and it never works out with his schedule, with working and whatnot, for him to do something like that. And I thought to myself, well, we have Cranberry Cove in our town, a body of water that we could jump into when it's really cold. And I thought to myself, maybe this is a way to get other community participants besides just children and families who are in the schools sort of involved. So I shared my idea with my fellow PTO members, and I think they thought I was a little cuckoo in the beginning. And truth be told, the department heads that I met with this summer, I think when I first walked into my meetings with them, they also thought I was a little crazy. But after the conversation, everybody was on board and very excited to support the idea and to work together. So just to give you a little background, back in, I think it was like July or August, I met with Chief Mix and talked to him about sort of what kind of role the police would have to play in terms of safety and traffic. I met with, and I hope I say this in the correct order, Deputy Chief O'Brien over at the fire department, and sort of what safety protocols and just safety things that we would have to think about in terms of what it takes to make it, God forbid something were to happen, somebody jumping into a frozen pond. So, I've talked with him about it. Bob Brown, I met with him over at the highway department, sort of what role that the highway department might have to play if the night before we have a huge snowstorm and we need the road to Kewanee plowed and the parking lot plowed. So again, all the department heads have been on board. I met with Jeff Simonak up at the superintendent's office, and of course our new principal, Jill Cotreau. And so right now, and obviously Josh Wolf at the rec department, because this could not happen without his permission as well. So right now we are looking to just have you guys okay the reduction of the fee for the Needles Lodge. We're sort of still trying to figure out exactly how we want this to look in terms of using the lodge, but definitely the code will be involved, obviously. We are going to have online registration for participants, and there will be a registration fee, but along with that, you'll get some swag for being a participant, so, something to entice people.
Well, it sounds like you've covered all your bases to me. And what she's looking for is the regular rate is $400, and they're looking for the discounted rate of $120.
So moved.
Second.
So the motion's been made and seconded. Melissa, excellent job. If you can get Jim Hickey to sign up and jump in, then I'll do it
That's
too.
also why I'm here.
No.
I'm hoping that
Okay, there's a challenge, you heard that.
Well, just to add to that, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'd like to maybe, part of this is, along with the registration, we're also going to be asking participants to be collecting pledges on their behalf. So let's say you decide that you want to take the plunge, we would be asking that you would raise money that, have people pledge to you. And we were thinking, along with some of the department heads and elected officials, prominent people within our community.
She's looking at you, Mary.
She's looking at me. I wasn't even looking up.
Tell me right now how much you're gonna give me to go in? Or would you rather do it in private, Mr. Chairman?
We'll do it in private.
But yes, so I will be, I'm not gonna say harass, but I will be reaching out to people and,
Good.
asking.
Well, excellent, good job.
Excellent, Melissa.
So the motion's been made and seconded. Any
I
questions?
just have one. Is this date of January 27th good with Adam? So that he can actually,
I will tell you, we picked this date because it's the Pro Bowl, which nobody watches anyways, but it's in between playoffs and the Super Bowl.
That's great.
I will tell you, there is a date that if we do get a snowstorm or a rainstorm or whatever, it will be Super Bowl Sunday, but it's in the morning, so people can jump,
Oh, God.
get warm, and then be ready.
Do you know the average snowfall the past 10 years on January 27th?
I don't, do you?
No, but you have everything else covered, so I figured you would.
That seemed like,
I'm more interested, Melissa, in what if the pond is frozen?
So I've already.
she's got that covered,
We
yeah.
have, we have the tools that can cut out a section of the ice.
Didn't Robbie say he'd help you out with that? Yeah.
Him and I guess the highway department
Yeah.
are the ones that.
They're all
that do
over
that.
it.
So a lot of these things, we still have a lot of details to take care of, but like sort of the big picture stuff is.
Okay. Just send me the address to send the check. All those in favor? 5-0.
Thank you very
Good
much.
job, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, back to new business. Set the hours for the state general election on Tuesday, November 6th from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and sign the election warrants.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any questions? All those in favor? 5-0. Okay, next, vote the energy reduction plan. And Matt, I'm gonna totally throw you under the bus and you're gonna explain that to us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So this has been a long time coming. The Energy Committee that was started back in 2009 when I was still in high school, believe it or not. We started on an energy reduction plan to help achieve green community status. And that will help us open up our town to receiving grants from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to help with energy reduction, which will help us further lower our energy consumption and hopefully lower our operation costs. So part of the deal is we have to come up with a plan. And Deb up in planning was so kind with help through Old Colony Planning and a lot of other folks in our operations, such as Whitman Hanson Regional High School, Mike McHugh, Bob Curran, Seth Pickering, Jeff Simonak, and so on. The list just could go on. And Mary, of course, can't, but going from there, it's just basically low-hanging fruit, nothing too crazy, just like switching out light bulbs from incandescent light bulbs to LED. It just kind of talks about making an action plan for all the municipal-owned buildings and school facilities. And as you guys read, hopefully, you saw the energy consumption through traffic lights and street lights and vehicles and water and sewer. And we've made a plan to address each of those. So the big one that I would be really excited to see would be to target the street lights, because that's pretty much where we could really reduce our energy consumption the most. Hopefully that'll be our first project, but we'll see what we can get from the Commonwealth. So with that said, we reviewed the plan, and the Energy Committee had just very minor recommendations, but for the most part recommends voting in favor of this.
It's a pretty detailed plan, too.
Yeah.
I just had one question. With the pending highway department thing, I noticed one of the things you guys are recommending is lighting and HVAC upgrades at the highway department.
Right. So, as I said, this has been a
Yeah.
10-year in the making kind of plan. As we all know, nothing is final
It
for
isn't
the
final. But I guess, is there, I guess, what's your timeline for doing that? I guess what my question is, like, is it 2 years out, 3 years out on that, so that if this other thing goes through, then?
Right. So nothing has been prioritized in the sense of which project we're going to embark on, because we only will get up to a couple $100,000 every year. So we're not going to be able to hit this all in one swing. And obviously, there is a lot of talk about maybe a new highway department building, and hopefully that's going to be, up to snuff with energy consumption and energy efficiency. So obviously, I think we'd probably put that on the back burner.
Okay.
And kind of target those streetlights like we were talking, and maybe we adopted the vehicle fuel efficiency a couple of weeks ago or a couple meetings ago, so that's a good step in the right direction. So, so to answer your question is, we're going to obviously pick and choose which projects make the most sense to address right off the bat. And I think that would be one that we'd hold off on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good.
And anything you do, Matt, would come before the board anyways, or at least the town administrator, where he could come to the board and say,
Right,
this is your
right.
plan. And
Exactly.
it's all voted on individually.
Right.
I know that you said you've been doing this for 10 years because McQuon is still, is listed in here, and that's already gone, so.
Right, well, it's not gone. It's still
Okay.
there. So it's, you know, I mean,
It's gone as a
some,
school.
it's something that we still have to address.
Right.
So is this kind of like a living document? So as McQuon gets, whatever happens to McQuon and highway, whatever, then you'll just modify this and.
Update.
Correct,
Okay.
yep, absolutely. Because as we all know, technology is changing so fast.
Right.
You know, 5 years ago, it was fluorescent light bulbs was the thing. Now
Right.
it's LED. So I think this is definitely a living document. You know, we can add on to the committee reports, energy, seeing how it's back up and kicking. And I think that might be something of interest to the town people.
I think that's awesome. I move we adopt this plan. I think it's great. We'll be able to get our share of grants and everything else. Good work. I love it.
Second.
And that's the main reason for, I mean, this is almost a symbolic vote.
Right.
We're just saying that we're on board with
Yep.
the plan wherever it, you know, morphs.
Yep.
No, absolutely, I agree. Any more questions for Matt? Good job, Matt.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add on to a couple of comments that Selectman Dyer just made. I want to make the board aware that at the last school committee meeting at which Selectman Hickey and I were present, the school committee did adopt this. And also in furtherance of Selectman Dyer's interest in reduction of energy via the streetlights. As I believe the selectman is aware, I've entered into conversations with a company that is taking a look at the viability of us taking over those streetlights and perhaps the potential availability of the money, the grant money that will come out of the adoption of this could be parlayed into the money we would need to purchase those street lamps from National Grid. So it all fits together quite well. So a lot of what he just described, and he's aware of this, is kind of in motion already. So we're kind of running on a two-rail sort of approach here that this adoption is necessary. It's a requirement by the state that the board vote in support of this. But again, we're also looking in anticipation of the board voting in favor of this. We're already moving forward on the first initiative. So just wanted to make sure the board was aware of all of that. Good stuff.
Okay, all those in favor? 5-0. Okay, next we have declare highway items for highway equipment for surplus. 2007 Ford F-150, a 2002 Ford F-350, and an air compressor.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any questions? All those in favor? 5-0, Mary. Okay, under requests, the Hanson Youth Cheerleading requests to use the Town Hall Green on Saturday and Sunday, December 1st and 2nd, to sell wreaths at a fundraiser for replacement of uniforms.
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? 5-0. Okay, appointments and resignations. First, we have Teresa Cusios, sorry. Resignation from the Recreation Committee.
So moved.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you, Teresa, for your service. Okay, next we have Sean Bailey, 204 Main Street. An appointment to the ZBA is an alternate, term to expire 6/30/2020.
So moved.
Motion been made.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So with this new appointment, I know that we've in the past discussed a new policy where, you know, if you want to be appointed, you have to come before the board.
Make an attempt to come in.
Yeah, so I just wanted to see,
That is a good question.
He was,
Mary, do you-
I had spoken to him in Virginia's office. He had planned on being here this evening. I did not hear from him. If you want to wait until he can actually make it in. I don't believe Mike's had a chance to meet with him. Mike
No, I
wasn't
have
here
not.
when I saw him. So if you want to
Motion back then.
table it.
Start doing this.
So we need to I want to walk that motion back, and just prospectively, could we please not have anybody put on the agenda unless that process has been followed, since that's what we all agreed with?
I expected him to be
Yes,
here.
it was, the
So I,
anticipation was
But if
that
he
all this
can't
would
be
have
here, I
been
think we
accomplished.
agreed that Mike could be
That's
sit
what I'm
with him.
saying,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's fine.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna-
Mary did it right.
No, it's not,
Yeah.
yeah.
no, I know.
We're gonna, we'll rescind this one and then next meeting, see if we can,
Put it as a table.
yeah, try to get him to come in. If he can't come in, then Mike, sit down with him.
Yes.
You know,
That's what I'm saying.
Yep. Thank you, Matt. Okay, next we have town administrator report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Primarily, what I'd like to go over is a quick update on where we stand, since this is our first meeting. Since the special town meeting back on October the 1st, I'd like to just update, a lot of this stuff was really moving some money around and making some purchases owing to the availability of free cash and some adjustments we made in the supplemental budget. But a couple of these entailed a bit more action, so I wanted to bring the board up to speed on a few of these things. Article 10, which was $35,000 for a senior center analysis. I have had conversations as recently as this morning with the director of the senior center, in which we are moving forward in hoping to engage the woman who, the expert who I had mentioned at town meeting, who works out of the University of Massachusetts. What we're hoping to do is put together a couple of potential dates for Mary and I to meet with her in the next couple of weeks. As Laura is aware, we did have the members, we had Mary and Karen, the library director, as well as members of their board over to McQuon within the last week or so to take a look at the potential for that facility to perhaps help either of those two operations. And the decision or the consensus at that point was there was a possibility of the senior center taking advantage of the newer portion of the building, which dates to 1986. So what we will be doing, as we mentioned, as we spoke of at that particular meeting, is we will roll that sort of a concept in to the direction that we give this consultant to see whether it makes sense, what the viability would be, on top of all the other potential options moving forward or needs moving forward of the senior center. So that's where we stand on that. That, you know, we've wanted to move forward on that fairly quickly. We really don't like to sit on this money when it is approved. We have, along those exact same lines, we are working in conjunction with the school department in terms of, and this is Article 11 for just a little under $50,000, to secure, winterize, and assess the hazards, the potential hazards at McQuon. The school department is pretty much taking and running with the ball to secure and winterize that building. My anticipation is that will start happening within the next week or so. We had gotten a quote from a company that will come in and do that destructive hazardous material assessment, but just for the sake of due diligence, the school department, the facilities department is reaching out to one other company that they've done business with in the past to make sure that the money that had been quoted to us is within reason. So it's not necessary. This is not within the requirements of 30B. It's just good business practice, which we try to obviously follow on a regular basis. What I think I'll touch upon, to go a little bit far of this, as far as McQuon is concerned, within the next week or so, the departments are going to be allowed to go through and look at what remains of furniture and equipment to see if there's anything that we can use going forward. after which time, and I believe it's tentatively scheduled for November the 3rd, there will be a general yard sale that residents, that the public can come in and take a look and perhaps purchase some items. After which, we have received, unofficially at this point, however, I will get into it into more detail at the next selectmen's meeting. The school department is asking permission to use the building for storage for any remaining items throughout the rest of the fiscal year. It makes an awful lot of sense to me because regardless of what we end up doing with the building, and let's say we go to the extreme, the dramatic extreme of demolishing the entire structure, we're not going to have those funds till town meeting in the spring anyway. So that building's not going anywhere, even if we make the decision tomorrow that we want to take it down. But what that affords us, that agreement will come with the agreement from the school department that someone will go through that facility on a daily basis, just to check on things, which we really hadn't had the wherewithal to do on our own. So what that can possibly do, and I forwarded the possibility to our insurer, is it may bring down the cost of insurance of that building. Obviously, insuring a vacant building with no security checks is a lot more expensive than something that is going to be checked on at least during, once a day during the week. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I'll bring that officially before the board when I get something official from the school
But to be
committee.
clear, if we do that, that does not mean that we're opening the building to the public. It's still going to be mothballed, but checked
Oh,
out
yes.
by security.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
The boarding up of the windows, the winterizing, and basically scaling back probably 90% or so in terms of the energy costs. Obviously, you don't want a building to go completely cold or completely dark because then you get into quicker deterioration. But no, that building is closed. At best, it'll be some dead storage in there. So I went a little further than I wanted to on that, but I touched upon something I would have said in 5 minutes anyway. Actually, a very, very positive note, Article 17, which I think everyone is very happy about. The cell tower at the middle school, I met with the principal of the company that had, as far as I'm concerned right now, the winning bid. We discussed how we should be moving forward with this post haste. Basically, what we're looking at is coming before the Board of Selectmen probably in the January timeframe to get the Board of Selectmen to sign a lease with this particular company. What they are entering in now is a bit more of a detailed research phase in terms of any conservation issues, any issues in terms of zoning. They're going to put all their ducks in line, come before the Board of Selectmen, again, around the January timeframe or so, get the lease signed, and then go before whatever boards they need to go before to get whatever additional permissions they need to move forward. The only ones that we could think of as we had that conversation was a potential to go before the Conservation Commission, which may not necessarily be the case once they put together their report. However, there is probably a potential where they'll need to go before the ZBA because of some setback issues. But they have, he did tell me, which is what I told the Board of Selectmen, and I believe I told the school committee, they will be putting in a monopole as opposed to a tower, a typical, what you think of as a tower. So it'll be even less visible, even though it's set back, you probably wouldn't see a tower anyway. So roughly, they're probably looking at construction, once everything is said and done, probably in the early spring. So, and that's when the lease will kick in, and we'll start not only getting the profits, but hopefully, well, not hopefully, fully expected to get better cell coverage for the majority of where we have blackouts or drop lines in the town. I will be going to the next school committee meeting, which I believe is, oh, I had written that down, I apologize. It's the second week in November. Whereas it was not part of the zoning bylaw that we passed some time ago, which allows us to put a cell tower on public property. We had made an agreement that I would come before the school committee and get their blessing. This gentleman will be coming with me as well, and we will, if not be accompanied by, we will have a report in terms of any safety questions. That they were, a few people when I last spoke to the school committee did raise the question of safety and health concerns around a cell tower, a monopole, a communications tower. We'll be fully prepared to address all that with some specific reporting for that particular site. So again, that's I believe the second week in November, and we're moving forward. We're moving forward as quickly as we possibly can on
Mike,
this.
when we work on the lease, can we just pay like real close attention so the same thing doesn't happen like with the prior lease? As far as I know you weren't here, but the last cell phone lease we had near the fire station was an open-ended lease, and it took us forever to get out of it. In
Oh,
case
yeah, I
something
think I
happens,
helped clean that up when I got in, yeah.
and have whoever, general counsel, whatever, just look at that and make sure that if this thing goes south, we can get out of it and we're not stuck in a lease.
Sure, yeah, I can
You know
understand the
what I'm
concern.
saying.
I know exactly what you're saying. I'll make sure that that's somewhere, and obviously, anything I brought before the board
I
will be
wanted to go
fully
forward,
fit.
don't get me wrong.
I believe that it's going to work out, but again, you just never know, and I'm sure you probably thought at the time the arrangement at the fire department, the fire station was gonna work out.
Right.
But I will make sure that there is language in there that protects the town in terms of not getting
Kenny's right, you
entangled
got
going forward.
hamstrung on that one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I will make sure it's not open-ended. Let's see. Article 20, which is the article in which we surplused and authorized the sale of the land across from the middle school. My intention in the next couple of weeks is to start the process that we used when we sold the piece of property up at the hospital. We will put out an invitation to bid, accept bids and open them at the appropriate time. What we are going to do is do kind of a postmortem to see how well, what improvements we could make over the process that we used for the hospital, and one of which, and it was to Mary's credit, she mentioned that we should probably put better signage up and put it up a lot sooner than we did at the property up at the hospital. I have a feeling that this particular piece of property, which is, as you're well aware, commercially zoned, is going to attract the interest of more than just one bidder. And I really look forward to, and of course, it's a one-time revenue. I really look forward to going forward with that process and getting that revenue for the town. And of course, putting that piece of property on the tax rolls, and with any luck, we'll have a decent commercial operation there that not only will we be able to garner some decent property taxes off, but the possibility of some personal property taxes, and a going concern in town that
So
could
it's not
possibly.
one-time revenue, because we're putting it back on the tax.
Well, that's what that's what I followed up on.
Yep.
And, in a sense, and I know this board in particular, Laura, can appreciate that, this is a roundabout way of economic development as well. So, all good things, all good things. I forwarded the information, this is Article 23, and as I mentioned at the time, when the Board of Selectmen went through the procedure of voting yet again, a second time, to designate a swath of land on Main Street as an economic opportunity area, it had been the recommendation from our point of contact with the state to also have town meeting vote the same, so that we had more than enough than not enough. All that information has been forwarded to the individual with the state, who is going to forward it to the Economic Development Council for approval, and I believe that meeting is at the end of November. So a lot of that was needed to move forward with the potential current TIF before us and a TIFs going forward, so. And Article 24, which was withdrawn on the floor, just to reiterate, we'll be revisiting that after we go through a slower, more deliberate, more sober look at the TIF that is being requested. There's really no harm, no foul, because, as I believe I mentioned on a couple of occasions, whether we voted it in October, whether we vote it tomorrow, whether we voted in May, the benefits of that particular TIF do not take place until the coming fiscal year. So just to reiterate why we did that, why we took a step back. It'll be the first such TIF in the town of Hanson. We want to make sure we do it right. We want to make sure that we set the stage for any potential appropriate future TIFs. We want to make sure that both the Board of Selectmen and town meeting are very comfortable with whatever recommendations the TIF committee puts before them.
Did you have something about the hazardous building materials survey?
I'm sorry, say it again?
I don't know, I think it says distribute the hazardous building materials.
Oh,
survey.
that's,
Yeah.
And then I've got a bunch of other things I'm going to touch upon, but you should have with you, I think I had asked Mary to put it, as opposed to printing it out at this point.
I printed it out.
Did you?
too.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
Just
small.
it's just for you, well, yeah, because you double-sided it, made
I
it smaller.
double-sided and made
yeah.
2 things on 1 page, so
This
you might
is-
want to look at your iPads.
Yeah.
This, at this point, is simply for the Board of Selectmen's review. It was something that was funded through town meeting back in the spring. Because of such, I wanted to make sure that it reached the Board of Selectmen's hands for their review. I've already looked through it. It is not as dire as, no pun intended, as I thought it might be. However, there are some things that will need to be taken care of. Regardless, I believe if we take the building down, if we have the new building constructed, there's a little bit of asbestos that needs to be tended to. There's some lead paint issues. Fortunately, there really isn't any PCB, which you generally get within the caulking and whatnot. So there are some things that, both in the short term and the long term, will need to be looked at and will be taken into consideration as we move forward with the potential new building. But again, I just wanted to deliver that to the board as a final document for the board's review. And if you have any questions going forward, by all means, get back
Well,
to
can
me.
we have them come and talk to us about it, since we'll likely have to have some kind of an article if we move forward with the new highway building, then we're gonna have to tear this down, which is why we got this study done. And I did have a question, did they only look at the building and not the actual land?
They looked at the building. That, I believe, was the parameters of what was voted at town meeting.
Okay, because obviously there's potential, a
Mhm.
large potential, for hazardous materials to be in the ground near the highway building.
Mhm.
Okay,
But again, within the parameters of what was voted, that was what the study took into consideration.
okay, so we really don't have a complete picture of what the mitigation of
Just
that
the
building
building.
would be.
Just the
Building
building.
and grounds.
That's correct, just the
Okay.
building. And certainly, we can have them in. I think it's probably appropriate to have them in at such time as we decide, if the town does decide to move forward
Yeah, I would
with
have them in until we figure
yeah.
out the next step on the new highway building.
And they are the same company that the town is using to look at the construction of the new building. So I don't think it's going to be much of an issue to have them come in at whatever time is appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the other things I'm going to touch upon, as you've probably seen around town, and I think it's a really good idea, there are signs up in particular locations in town notifying the residents of hydrant flushing and potential dirty water. I think my understanding is there really hasn't been a really complete flushing of the hydrants in quite some time. I think it's a really good step forward to try to ensure that the water flow and the water quality is good going forward. But particularly, I wanted to mention that it was going on, and I applaud the water department for putting those signs out. I think they're very helpful. We will be conducting the JJ's hearing in terms of the debris that still sits there. I did hear back from the chief of police that the DA's office has absolutely no issues with us removing that. It's not going to impede anything that they're doing or that they may do. As I may have mentioned, either individually or at a meeting, that was one of the concerns that was raised, and we did address that. And so we will be issuing within the next couple of days or so an official letter to the owners, if they so choose, to be at that hearing, and we will move forward thusly. We will have the fire department, well, the fire chief, the police chief, and the building inspector at that meeting to make the determinations, as well as town council, to make the determinations that are appropriate for the board to.
So it will be a hearing at the selectmen's meeting?
Yes.
Okay, and In the interim, so we're talking about the 30th?
Yes.
Okay. In the interim, I have had a few people ask why it's not fenced off a little bit better in case like kids wander over there or like do something, you know, like kids will do, wander onto the property. It's sort of open.
Oh, yeah, I don't disagree with that.
I don't know if
I'm at a
until we
loss.
take that next step, whether we're even able to, because it is private property.
Yeah, and basically that's where I was going with it. I don't think that absent such a hearing, that we have any authority to do anything on that piece of private property. And I would also say that we probably don't have the funding for it as well. My anticipation is after this meeting, if the board chooses to move forward with taking upon the cost of removal, is that I go before the finance committee and have a discussion about getting some funding from the reserve account to fund that. So, so that's the plan on the
I think we
30th.
should have a hearing first before you have that discussion.
Yep.
Oh, what, with the FinCom?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah.
He said we'll make the decision then.
Yeah, and then I'll ask. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't like to presume anything.
Yeah.
I am guessing you're gonna go in that direction, but no, I would have that conversation after the fact. We talked about the tax hearing, and the fact that the Board of Health will be at that meeting as well to have a discussion, on the transfer station. I talked about the Quan yard sale, the potential of storage there. An interesting note, I'd like to recognize the fact that Kevin Dykes and Steve Graham of our highway department participated in something called the Snowplow Rodeo, which isn't as frivolous as the name may lend itself for people to think. It's actually a competition, this was a countywide competition at this point, in which highway snowplow teams are tested in terms of their ability to make sure vehicles are safe, make sure that vehicles are appropriate in terms of snow plowing in a timed amount in addition, then they have sort of a course that they go through with different turns and different, I don't want to say obstacles, but challenges that someone plowing would have on a regular basis during the winter. They won that on the county level. And it is fairly significant. And they've been, as a result of winning on the county level, they will be attending the statewide competition on the 17th up in Boxborough. So I wanted to make sure that we recognize that as an accomplishment, and I think that it really is a testament to, and I think the Board of Selectmen has said this to me, as many residents have said to me on a regular basis, the fact that this town is very well maintained during the winter months when we have snow events. And it really, if you think about it, it doesn't surprise me that two of our highway employees, given that level of expertise, that level of
Can we
performance.
recognize them and send them a thank you letter from the board?
I would love to do that for you. I would be very appreciative if the board asked me to do that, and which you just have.
Okay.
And oddly enough, not oddly enough, but there is actually a national competition as well. So if they win in
Is that in
Boxborough,
Colorado?
it's in Colorado.
That's exactly where it is.
Yes, it is in Colorado.
Where there's really snow.
So,
That's a big, the
So-
only place I could think of was a lot of snow.
and the only thing the highway superintendent is a little, would be a little concerned about is we'd be losing two of our best guys, potentially during a snow event, but certainly we would support them going there. And as I mentioned earlier today in our staff meeting, is when you say a national event, you have to kind of qualify that a little bit, because I don't believe you'll see really too many teams from Louisiana or Oklahoma going up there. So
Yeah.
the competition won't be quite 50 states, but so it'll even their odds up or improve their odds a little bit. So to Kevin and to Steve, my personal congratulations, and I will send them a letter from the Board of Selectmen congratulating them, and we wish them the best of luck on the 17th up in Boxborough. After the meeting that we just had with East Bridgewater present in the introduction of our new IT director, I ran out there real quick and I offered to our friends from East Bridgewater my availability to have a similar meeting in East Bridgewater, which they said could take place on the 29th of October. That's a Monday. So I wanted to bring that last second in terms of putting it together. But I wanted to invite any members of the Board of Selectmen, if they wish to attend a reciprocal meeting. Again, it wouldn't take very long, as this meeting didn't take. But if any of the boards members are so interested, I'll send more information in terms of the time, but it would be the 29th of October. And again, it's a Monday night.
I would love to, but I know where I will be in Maine.
Oh, there you go.
I think that's a pretty good excuse, so I think they'll understand that.
What about the invitation for the veterans?
He emailed one out to everyone.
Okay. Did everyone get that invitation? Because he,
Yes.
Yeah, I had written it down.
for the
We emailed it.
veterans agent had
Yes.
sent out an invitation about the Veterans Day brunch.
On the 8th.
On the 8th.
Yeah, I know I can't be, I'm gonna be in North Carolina for the 7th, 8th, and
Check your
9th.
emails. He sent it out like.
So I don't know if
midday.
anybody
I
can
got it today.
go to that.
Okay.
Okay,
all
maybe I
right.
just gotta have it.
Yeah, it was
We
like.
could-
he sent it
somebody
out
could
today,
Yeah,
go.
so-
I thought he did the group email
he-
to all the
yeah.
selectmen.
He did, but he asked for,
He said he didn't
for
have-
Selectman Bloss
Oh, I
and
didn't
Selectman
know.
Hickey's
Yeah.
email.
Right, and so I
But you
sent
said you
those out, I
saw
just
it.
wanted,
I saw it today.
so
Okay.
maybe that, it did say selectmen, which I thought included everybody, but I wasn't sure. So just want to make sure everybody
Probably
got
on the
it.
list and he didn't realize it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, what was the RSVP date on that one?
Yeah.
I
I
didn't
can't
print
remember
out
what the
the
date is.
email.
I need a calendar.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it wasn't
That's the
like,
day of the event.
No, well, it's not like tomorrow.
Yeah, because I'm
Okay, yeah.
leaving,
Oh,
I'm
he
leaving on the
okay.
7th. There's an RSVP date that's before, prior to the 8th. I don't know what that was, though.
Yeah, so they do it, I thought it was on a Saturday,
It was
though.
in November, right?
I think it's on.
November 8th.
I think it's on.
November
Veterans Day.
10th, isn't it?
He wants to know by,
no, it was,
Yeah.
Oh, was the 8th the deadline? Okay.
oh, okay.
Yeah, the veterans brunch, that's what I thought. The veterans brunch was on the 10th. Let me just see what he said in his email. RSVP
Maybe
by the 8th.
Okay, so
yeah.
that's the.
If you
that's
let
the
him know
date
by
of
the 8th,
Yep.
the event is actually,
Is that a Friday?
no, actually, I misspoke, I'm sorry. The brunch is on the 8th, and he wants you to RSVP on the 5th.
Okay.
So the
We
8th
got a
is
little while.
the 8th is a Thursday.
Thursday. Yeah, because I
Did
thought
say
they
the
did it during the week.
Yeah, you
but
did.
it's fine.
But I said no.
Well, you've got an email, so.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need a lot of money to get in that Cranberry Cove.
The other really quick things I want to mention is I wanted to publicly thank County Rentals. They've donated the use of a bouncy house through Steve Howard for the event on the 28th at Camp Kawani. So it's not the type of donation that we need to ask the board to accept, since it's we're not getting anything really in terms of retaining a piece of equipment or any money. But I wanted to make sure the board was aware of that, and that I publicly thanked him for making that, that donation.
Can we send a
Do we
card?
need to do that now, Mike, since our next meeting?
You don't need to vote it. No, you don't need to vote
He's
it.
just acknowledging.
We're just acknowledging. Something like that, I mean, if he was giving it to us, you guys would have to accept it. Or if he was giving us money, you guys would have
He's
to accept it.
donating the use
He's
of it.
donating the use, so, and he'll take it back the next day. So it's not something that you guys need to vote on, but it's something I wanted to acknowledge publicly, because we certainly do appreciate it.
And how about a written card?
Yeah.
So you can hang it up on the fridge.
Yeah, yeah. With
Just on a
magnets.
side note on that, Mike, Steve Howard and Country Rentals has been very good to groups in Hanson. I think Kenny would also attest
Oh,
to
yeah.
that. For more than,
Whatever the
Oh,
town needs, they
consistently.
just pick up the
Take
phone and
note,
call.
Melissa,
than
for the
10
cola
years.
plunge.
Yeah. Gotta be close to 15.
His first question is, are you picking it up? That's what he
Yeah.
says.
Yeah. Well, because his costs are really delivery
Right, oh, yeah,
costs, so he's
exactly.
more than willing
Yeah.
to,
You pick it up, go for
yeah.
it.
All right, the other quick things I'll mention, the private road grading is gonna take place on the 25th and the 26th of this month. They're gonna start on the northern part of town and move to the south, which I think is the way he does it every year. We will be bringing in 2 firms on the 30th to interview, in a sense, before the board for legal services. I do believe that I sent all of you, and if you haven't gotten it, just a quick synopsis of each of the firms, just to give you an idea of their experience and what they propose for cost. Very, very high-level, top-level stuff. I think the real questions should come from the board to the particular firms that interview with the board. There are 5 in total. We'll bring all 5, as I mentioned. We'll do 2 on the 30th and probably 3 at the next meeting, which is November the
13th.
13th. The auction is, as you're probably all well aware, is next Friday, the 26th. 12 parcels, 4 or 5 of which are of some considerable value, the rest of which are land of low value. That, however, regardless, it'll put some one-time revenues again in the town's coffers, and it will return all of those properties to the tax rolls going forward. So, and I do believe that's it. It is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, next, minutes. Need to approve minutes for September 18th for executive session, and what's the other?
Approve but not
To approve and to hold.
To approve and not
Thank you.
release, yeah.
Approve and not release.
So moved.
Looking for a motion?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? 5-0. I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes of October 25th, regular session.
No, September 25th.
Yeah, thank you, September 25th.
You're jumping ahead.
Regular and executive with the executive hold only.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? 5-0. And last but not least, looking for a motion to approve the minutes on October 1st.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. All those in favor? 5-0. Okay, one-day liquor license, Laurie Armstrong, Hanson, Saturday, November 3rd, from 4 to 10 for a wedding. Second one is Donald Morrison, Hanover, Saturday, November 17th, from 6 to 10 p.m. for an anniversary. Looking for a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? 5-0. Community reports. 200th anniversary, Laura.
Not much to report on there. We're meeting the 25th. We met at the end of September. We're still working on the pop-up store, and a ton of activities. We are still looking for Hale and Hardy citizens to join us, because the more the merrier. We have a lot of little events, and we're gonna have to break down into subcommittees. So regardless of what your interest is, there's bound to be a subcommittee that will fill your need. So come on aboard. Yeah, and we're meeting the 25th. I'll give you a update after that.
Okay. All right, final Plymouth County Hospital Reuse Committee.
No updates at this time.
Okay. And McQuon School Reuse Committee, Laura.
Well, obviously, the article passed for funding the hazmat and the mothballing of it. But simultaneously, really what we're focusing on is what is the future use of that site going to be. I just want to mention I've gotten a couple of calls from concerned people that were going to have some type of sport or activity in McQuon and really hadn't realized that the building was going to be mothballed over the winter. As usual, Bob Hayes stepped up and is helping people try to find other schools within the system where they can hold those activities. So if anybody is being inconvenienced or had not noticed that we were going to be closing the school, you can certainly contact me or Bob, and we will work with you to try to find some place for you to have your indoor activities during the winter. Mike had released the McQuon Future Use Survey at town meeting. We've gotten some hard copies there, and I believe they were also up at the library and town hall, Mike.
And the senior center.
Yep, senior center. We also put it out on Facebook, an act which I bitterly regret in retrospect, but in the interest of trying to be collaborative and collegial, I put it out there, and people were commenting, which is fine, but the comments really only going to be collected through the survey, not through Facebook posts, so I eventually had to turn off the commenting. I will be posting it again for people to be taking it, but just to kind of level set, the survey is really just a preliminary data collection tool. We're not meaning this to be highly scientific, process. It's really here's some options that we're thinking about, kind of figure out what resonates with people. And then as a committee, we're going to just talk about, what the findings are. It's not going to be, our decisions aren't going to be purely based upon what the survey is. We'll end up having some open forums, public forums, and, really seeking a lot of community input, because this is an incredibly important piece of land that's contiguous to importantly, very important institutions, the school, the senior center, and the library, and all of the, sports fields. So we will be seeking more feedback. So for people that were a little concerned that we were going to close down comments and solely focus on the results we got. But thus far, I have to say, I'm very pleased. We've gotten almost 400 responses.
It's actually amazing.
So it is amazing, and they're not duplicate, at least the IP addresses aren't duplicate. There is that. So I would encourage people, it's on the town website. Again, I will be putting it out on Facebook, but turning off commenting. And we'll be collecting those and talking about them at our next meeting. So just to, again, level set, nothing has been decided in terms of what we're going to be doing. We may tear it down, we may reuse a portion, we may end up doing nothing, depending upon what funding we get. But the ball's in play, and we need to get feedback. Mike, what's our ETA on the hazmat piece of that? Like, what are we looking at? Because, that's gonna kind of, it's going to strongly influence what direction we move in, because we really aren't going to be able to look at partial reuse if it turns out that the hazmat materials there are so costly to mitigate that it's just, going to be unwieldy.
It actually can move rather quickly. Again, I just await the second quote from the school committee, from the school department, with the company with whom they speak. I've already got pretty much everything in line to move forward with the company that had given us the original quote. I do not expect the quote from the people that the school department have used in the past to be too far off from what I've gotten from this particular company. And again, as I may have mentioned, this particular company assisted me in Avon in doing the exact same thing with a school building of about the similar age, in making the determinations of what needed to be done in terms of hazmat mitigation. So I actually reached out today to the school department, to Ernie, to ask that question, as well as I asked him when the potential walkthrough could be for the departments, and I just haven't heard back yet, but it's only been a day. So as soon as we're comfortable with what information, I mean, he may come back to me with a number that's far beneath what we were quoted. I strongly doubt it. As soon as he comes back with it, I will then put some fire under the individuals out of Stoughton to move forward.
Because either way, whether we tear it down or we keep it, we need to know what we're dealing with.
Well, exactly, and I don't think I'm speaking out of school, no pun intended. I think that at a minimum, we're looking at tearing down the old building. Mm-hmm. So we do need to know what is in there and what needs to be mitigated. And as you mentioned, if we are going to retain the newest section of the building, we have to make a determination of whether or not there are things we need to do in the here and now to make that building safe if we're going to reuse it. So again, as soon as I get that information, we're going to move rather quickly.
I think you had a question.
Yes, you can ask a question.
Okay. When you say the newer part of the building,
There you go.
The back part? Where
That is the older part.
Are you sure? Because there's a section of the back part where kindergarten was, and I don't know what was upstairs at that point, but that was a newer building because
The section that we're looking at is the gym, the cafetorium.
Which is the original
The
building.
front of the
That's
building.
the
It's
part.
it's the front part.
Okay,
Yeah.
so not the back part, which is actually
No.
where the
The
addition was
class,
put on.
in other
No.
words, we may, I'm just from what I've heard, maybe the classrooms will go and we'll be saving the gym and cafeteria
Exactly.
and
That's
office
what we're
area.
looking at.
Exactly.
But I think we should stop the old and new, because
Okay.
it's all original except for that little piece
That was put
of
on
classroom.
like fourth
Okay.
grade.
Because my impression has been that particular section about which I have been speaking was more circa 1986, but maybe
No,
that's more
there's
than what
no-
you're speaking. So to be clear, what we're talking about is the potential reuse of the gymnasium and the cafeteria and some of the administrative
The
section.
administrative,
part
the
of it.
teacher, you know, the teacher's lounge, like that piece forward kind of thing. Yeah.
I have one more question, just listening to you guys talk about like the hazmat and sort of looking into the materials and whatnot that are there. Is that something that money is already allotted?
No.
That's what we voted at town meeting.
Oh, okay.
We
So that
voted-
was part of the winterizing too?
Yes, what was
Okay.
voted at town meeting was approximately $37,000 to winterize, which is basically making sure that the water system can get through the winter, to put up some rudimentary lighting, to board up the bottom half of the building, because somebody's gonna break windows, somebody's gonna try to get in, and to do that assessment of the hazmats. That does not take into, even by any stretch of the imagination, the actual mitigation of the hazmats, which is going to cost an awful lot of money, whether we take the building down or we don't.
They won't do the work, they'll just do the assessment on what it's.
Yes, so that we know when we go out to bid to do the actual, if we do the demo, we have to do some sort of mitigation in a building that, part of the building that we're gonna keep, how we cost that out. And again, if we tear that down, and I have the experience of tearing, unfortunately, a building down, a similar building in Avon, the cost of the demo was far beneath the cost of the hazmat mitigation, I want to say by easily 5 to 1. So,
With this hazmat stuff within the building, did they also check the soil?
Yeah.
I know Laura had pointed that out with when you guys were talking
Highway
about the
department.
highway department. Is that gonna be true of the soil?
well, there's
around
generally,
or-
generally when you're talking a school, there aren't any soil considerations.
Okay.
What you generally get in terms of hazmats with the school, the only possible migration of hazmats comes out of the PCBs, which is basically the caulking in the windows. And what you find is that sometimes that will migrate into the stonework or into the wood. It does not, generally does not migrate into the
And the
ground.
reason I mentioned highway, specifically the land there, is that our prior town engineer and I had a discussion that there was a small hazardous dump near that area where the highway is. And then under that, even if the highway guys were super excellent stewards of the environment, that building's been deteriorating, and they've had, all the vehicles there, all the materials they have to store. So there's bound to be material in that ground. So I think it's important to take a look at it. But Kevin has something.
Thank you. Through you to the town administrator. Mike, the original proposal that you gave us when the article was to tear down McQuon, that was what, about $800,000 to tear it down?
Yeah, it was, I think it was 700 and
Seven.
change.
Seven and change, 7 and 8. Did that include the abatement of, or the removal of the
Well,
hazmat?
it was based on an estimate that was given to us by the same company that took down the hospital. But at that point in time, we were unaware of the fact that the degree of the hazardous material analysis that had been done, not necessarily by the school, but I think it was done by the state when the town was considering whether or not they wanted to take the two buildings down and build a new building.
So it did.
It was not
but not to the level.
Exactly.
that we now believe it.
Exactly. So
But
it was.
really, what we wanted to try to avoid was a gotcha. We voted town meeting for the
Right.
700 and whatever thousand, and then the guy comes back and says, wait a minute, we didn't know you had caulking with XYZ. And so, if we do decide to move forward with the tear down, one of the additional steps that I've asked Mike to take is to ask our town engineer to do a sanity check on the bid that we get from people to make sure there's no gotchas in the contracts of, because I wouldn't know looking at a contract whether we haven't accounted for asbestos and this and that and that. But we need somebody who's got that mindset, who has dealt with, with tear downs and knows all of the little
I was
pitfalls.
just asking because when we got the original proposal, I remember it saying hazmat in there, but
Yeah,
it
and
wasn't.
it did.
Yeah.
But again, as Laura points out, and I touched
Sure,
upon, it wasn't we came to the realization, which is one of the reasons we took a step back, was that we were uncomfortable with the quote that we had gotten from the demo company. because I don't think full consideration, I don't think a full examination of potential, little hidden gems in that building had been assessed, so.
And that's all I had for McQuon Future
Yeah, I
Use
think we're
Committee.
jumping ahead a little bit, but it's okay. Highway Building Committee, we haven't met until that property is conveyed over to us. So that's the end of our regular session. I'm looking for a motion to go into executive session to conduct strategy sessions and preparations for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiation with non-personnel. And an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of a public body, and the chair so declares. The police lieutenant.
So moved.
Second. Motions are made and seconded. Roll call.
Aye.
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 We're now in executive session.